This video was brought to you by Noble Knight Games. More about them at the end of the video. Hey everybody, Kimberly here, and I hope you are ready to scheme and stash, because in Goblin Vaults, you are going to need all your wits about you. In Goblin Vaults, players are trying to gain as many gears as possible, and there are, yes, of course, a variety of ways to gain those gears. But in the beginning of the game, this is where every game will be different, essentially, because players are going to set out different goal cards. And there are 7 goal cards, and they are front and back, which means that they have different goals on either side, depending on which side you play it on. And you're going to have 3 of those goal cards. So really the combination of goals that you have, which side of the card that you're playing it on, definitely changes the game. Now these goals are going to be things that you evaluate at the end of the game, but they give players direction. They give players a reason to want to vie for those cards that are going to be put out in the center of the table. The cards that players are going to play with will be shuffled up depending on the amount of players. You might have 4, 5, or 6 suits. And in each suit, there are 10 cards. So those are going to get shuffled up, and players are going to receive 10 cards in their hand. The rest of the cards that are not dealt out to players will be placed in the center, and 3 cards are going to be flipped over, placed out one next to the other. Those are the 3 cards that are essentially up for grabs this round. Now, not only that, there's going to be a card flipped over from the top of the deck that becomes the suit. This is the trump suit. Because as with many of those kind of trick-taking games, there is a trick suit that has like the highest score, and then you also have value, which is 10 is the highest, 1 is the lowest. And at the very beginning of the round, the start player is going to look at those 3 cards that are out there in the block, right in the center of the board, and they're going to pick 1 card from their hand to place underneath one of those 3 cards. They are essentially bidding for that card. And that's going to be public knowledge, so that when players go in turn order, they will look at their cards and say, what do I want to go for? It could be the same one as someone else. It could be a different card, but you know what they played, so you also know what the trump suit is, and you understand how to win the card. Starts with the trump suit is the kind of winner, and then after that, it just starts at 10 all the way down to 1. So you're kind of looking at what they have and you're thinking, do I want to bid more and maybe win that card? Do I want to underbid them? But there is a price for underbidding, and it's one of your gear tokens, and you know that those are victory points. So why would you want to underbid? Well, you like the card that you're bidding with more than a card in the block, and you essentially want to put it into your vault. Because at the end of each round, all of those cards in the center are going to be evaluated, and a player is going to win that card, or they will win the card they bid with if they lost the bid. Any cards that are not taken essentially get an extra gear, so they become more valuable for players to take, or essentially bid for to take on the next round, because when they take it, they essentially get that bid token. They get the gear, which is victory points. So there's just some real cleverness here, and I find it to be incredibly fascinating. Because cards have a variety of information on them. The first one is they've got their suit. That's going to be the color or the image that you see in the panel down the left side. They also have a value, 1 to 10. There's a faction icon in the center of the top of the card, and that faction icon associates with a player in the game, possibly, if you have a full player count. Because players are going to receive points for getting cards of their faction into their vault at the end of the game. So if I have the kind of purple spriggy thing that has 3 arrows coming out of it, that's my faction. I want to get those cards to get into my vault because they will be worth points for me. If other players get them, they're just not worth any points. Now, the thing I haven't talked about is how players put their cards into their vaults. They essentially have 4 columns, and those columns can have 3 cards each, which means you have 12 spaces that you're dealing with. But when you play a card into your vault, it plays down the first card, then the next card goes essentially overlap or on top of it in that splay where it's the second card in the column and the third card played is the third card played in that particular column. And the placement matters because you'll see in the top corner of all the cards on that right side is where that card will gain points for. And at the end of the game, if you have a number 1 card, which is the highlighted backmost card in a splay, you'll get 1 point if it's in the first position. If that card is highlighted in the middle card or the second spot and it's in the second spot of a column, it gets 2 points. And if you have a card that's third and it's placed third in that column, it's going to receive 3 points. So you really want to make sure that your cards are in an order that banks you the most gears. The trickiest thing about placing your cards into your vault is that you're also going for those public objectives, and you're also trying to get your faction color. You're also trying to, manipulate your hand so that you continually play cards that are beneficial to you and gaining cards that you want to put into your vault. It's just enough to really keep you on your toes. And if that's not enough, I have to tell you there are 2 more really cool, sneaky things that you can do. Now, if you are the start player, at the end of a phase, after the vault cards have been divvied up, you get to have a warden phase. What that means is that you are going to look at that top card that's not in the block, and you will look at that and say, do I want that card to still be the trump card for the next round, or do I want to swap it with one of the 3 cards that are in the public display block area? And you can trade it out for what's down in the 3 card area. So you are essentially adding or this new card that wasn't available, but making a different trump opportunity for the next round because you're not going to be the start player. And I think what that does is it gives that start player on their way out the door some agency, some choice that's going to affect the other players. And I think that is a real strategic moment that first player has to take advantage of because it is super cool. You are essentially choosing one of those lower 3 cards to swap with that top card that just simply serves as the trump card. So that's the warden phase at the end of each round. Now there's also something called the warden action, and that's really cool too, because if players play a card from their hand that matches the faction, they get to, when they play their card, do one of 2 things. They can draw the top card from the deck and replace it with the card from their hand, which I think is so helpful when you're really stuck with a card that you just got dealt at the beginning and you don't want it or it's not going to be helpful for you. You can do that and it gives you a new influx of cards. Or towards the second half to the later part of the game, what you can do is move a card in your vault anywhere else in your vault. You essentially take it and you slide it in between cards, behind cards, on top of cards. You just can't exceed your 4 columns that have 3 cards each in them. And you are essentially only playing 9 cards in the game. So you might want 3 perfect columns of 3 each, and that might be the best way to score the most points, but it's really, really hard to do. So having this bonus warden action that every player can trigger on their turn in the round when they play down their card from their hand is so cool. It really does make the game that much more strategic, especially when you just kind of get the luck of the draw with the cards being dealt to you. There's a lot to like here, a lot to like with Goblin Vaults. And I think that it works pretty well with that kind of faux third player if you're playing 2 players, which I did start that way. But then playing with 4 or 5 creates a real nice tension and push and pull when it comes to the cards you're bidding for in the open market display in that kind of block area. And trying to figure out how to best manage your personal vault because that's what you're going to score at the end of the game. So I honestly couldn't be happier getting my hands on Goblin Vaults because I think this feels so nice. It plays smoothly. It has a nice, clever system to it. The only thing is that every time you look at what you want in your hand, you always want to play with those cards, but you kind of have this brain, you have to do this brain shift of, I'm playing a card from my hand to gain the card from the center area, and that's what you put in your vault. So it's got just enough of this like twist to it that kind of messes with your brain, but it's fun. It's really fun, and I think the mapping out and trying to plan and get a perfect vault is such a lofty goal, and it's going to be so hard to do. So I think what it does is it just grinds you enough that it makes you want to try again and then try with those other objectives, because again, there are so many different ways to have those global objectives and different combinations that create just a different experience every single time you play. I think it does scale quite well with more players and with fewer players. It's replayable, and it comes in a nice size box. So I really did enjoy Goblin Vaults and kind of just a little bit of that kind of twistiness that the game offers players with your bidding, because it's not simultaneous. You see what the first player plays, and you see what the second player plays, you see what the third, and it's you, and you're like, well, from the hand of cards I have, what's the best option for me and my vault and my faction and my progress towards those global objectives? Just really, really cool. So that's it for me this time, and Goblin Vault. Go check it out yourself, see what you think. All right, everybody. Bye. I can rely on Noble Knight games for the RPGs I'm looking for, along with the board games, war games, minis, card games, and dice that suit my gaming needs. They also have specials running constantly with deals and offers that provide gamers like me and you an opportunity to invest in new and used games that have been quality controlled for accuracy and perfection. Make Noble Knight Games your friendly local game store. Satisfaction guaranteed.